We did this walk between Christmas and New Year 2024. Unfortunately, the fog came down and we had to give it up as a bad job because we just couldn't see anything. I've used some of the drone footage though, as the sea was so calm and it looked really good. Jamie also did some more drone footage on other days, so that's why the weather, the sea and the tides look different as we're going along. There was a Roman camp on Seaford Head, and amphora have reportedly been found by divers. All I found is golf balls, as the 18th is on our left as we start to climb up the hill. There's also said to be a large cannon just off the end of this small breakwater, but I've not seen that. I have seen lots of lead fishing weights and golf balls that carve out perfect circles in the chalk seabed as they roll around on the tide coming in and out. Perfect circles in the chalk seabed is something we'll look at later, probably not made by golf balls. Brought at Plymouth by Alderman Frederick for £390 but was wrecked on a return from Alicante near Birling Gap. 13 bars of silver hidden in the side of the ship at the time of the sale were not discovered until found in the wreck and stolen by the country people when she broke up. This wreck in Lloyd's Shipwreck Index, if you have that book, is listed as unidentified, and it's 00/11/1736. That is actually the St Peter. It was lost on the 24th of the 11th, 1736. The Neptune and the Industry were part of a small convoy that was on its way to the Downs that ran aground near Birling Gap. The Neptune, a hire tender, could not be refloated and had to be abandoned as a wreck. The convoy was accompanied by the bomb vessel Terror and several other hire tenders. They encountered strong winds, drizzle and fog, and about 10:30 p.m. the Terror and 3 tenders all ran aground near Birling Gap. The bomb vessel was refloated and saved, but the Industry capsized and became a total wreck. The captain of the escorting bomb vessel Terror, a master of one of the tenders, was criticised for failing to keep a proper lookout of complacency and neglect. The vessels that did manage to free themselves, including the Terror, carried on their journey eastwards, but were hit by another storm and they all foundered a short distance off of Rye Harbour. A lot's been written about the wreck of the Nympha Americana. All the information about it is on my blog. I do like one particular story though, the lady who lost her husband there, although she probably didn't like losing him quite so much. It was reported in the Derby Mercury in 1747. The Nympha prize was wrecked on our coast last Monday, and being very richly laden, it drew some thousands of people to the place for the sake of plunder. The weather at the time being excessive cold and wet, numbers of them perished on the shore and on their way homeward. I believe not less than 50, and a great many more were taken up as dead, but being put into warm beds have recovered. Among the dead are several women, one in particular having 2 small children. As her neighbours were all gone to the wreck, she could not leave them, so carried them with her, but soon perished in the cold and was found dead with the 2 children crying with her. Almost perished with hunger and cold. Indeed, there is hardly a village for several miles around the place, but what have had 1 or 2 died or broken their limbs at the wreck. I must not omit of one circumstances, being it is as a little diverting, which is a woman at Seaford whose husband was dead at the wreck, hired a cart and horses to fetch him in order to bury him, but the carter, not knowing him, bought her another man instead of her husband, upon which she refused to pay the carter, and he left her the man. You've got to take all this with a bit of a pinch of salt, because there are no reports in any of the churches around the area of any mass graves at that time. Going back to what I said at the start about circles in the chalk, This was a well which was discovered closer to Bell 2 and found to be Bronze Age. It featured on a programme called Shoreline Detectives. There's a link in the description, as well as to a blog called the Citizens blog, where these pictures are from. And I thought the round holes under Shortcliffe were also wells, but after a chat with the chap who did the research into the well shaft pictured, he seems to think they are naturally occurring due to wave action. Well, I don't know. Did he just not know they was there? Have a look at the film and pictures and make your own mind up. Colonel Harry Trelawney was a passenger, one of about 40 injured soldiers on the Golden Fleece. He was an officer in the Coldstream Guards who was returning home after being injured whilst leading the 1st Battalion at the Battle of Monmouth during the American War of Independence. The other passengers on board were all injured soldiers, and there was even a pregnant woman. As reported in the Leeds Intelligencer, the people were so very weak and feeble and incapable of assisting themselves that they were obliged to stay on board the vessel and wait their fate, in consequence of which they were either killed by falling spars or drowned in the holds. This small convoy, led by Siren, coming from Spithead, were driven ashore at Cuckmere Haven when the weather worsened. The ship's master, John Chandler, was dismissed the service, serving 6 months in Marshalsea prison for his ignorance and neglect. Marshalsea prison was a prison in Southwark and housed all sorts of prisoners, as well as men accused of crimes at sea. Most of England's prisons were full of debtors in the 18th century. It became well known in the 19th century through the writings of Charles Dickens, whose father was sent there in 1824 for a debt to a baker. Forced to leave school and work in a factory, Charles Dickens based several of his characters on his own experience, most notably Amy Dorrit, whose father was in Marshalsea for debt so complex nobody knew how to get him out. Between 4 and 5 o'clock on Friday evening last, the weather being squally, a ship laden with wine and almonds struck on the rocks on our coast near Birling Gap, and in a few minutes afterwards was dashed to pieces by the violence of the waves, when every soul on board, one man excepted, perished with the wreck. We cannot say to a certainty what nation the ship belonged to. A some reports have her to be a West Indian man and others a Dutchman. The man that saved himself being a foreigner and among country people only, but little information could be obtained from him. He has, however, been sufficiently understood to learn that the number of hands on board were 12, so that 11 have perished. On his getting to land and seeing some persons making towards him, he fled from them like a wild man, but being very feeble was soon overtaken and made sensible of the friendly intentions of those who followed him, when he permitted them to conduct him to the house of a Mr. Willard of Birling Gap, where he was put to bed and had all possible care taken of him. The tide was at ebb when the ship struck, and the sea was said to be reddened with the quantity of wine that was staved. The country people being at the wreck many hours before the officers arrived, they saved and secured to their own use a considerable quantity of the wine and almonds. The Anna Amelia was a Swedish ship, Gottfried Volkring master, laden with wine in hogsheads, which was a barrel, from Bordeaux to Lübeck in Germany. She came ashore at Birling Gap and became a total wreck. The crew and 3/4 of the cargo were saved. The next day a number of soldiers from the barracks at Eastbourne arrived to get a taste of the wine which was being collected in their hats, boots, or whatever else they could find to collect it with, as it poured out of the ship's seams. It was potent stuff though, and they were soon drunk and up to no good, which, as they were armed, was not a good sign. The sergeant's guard arrived before anyone got shot though and made them walk back to their barracks. Shortly afterwards it was reported in the paper that when the agents and others busied in clearing the wreck of the Anna Amelia, the Swedish galliot laden with wine which had stranded near Birling Gap had of necessity left her, it happened there was a large fall of the cliff, not less than 10,000 tons of chalk, which must have buried more than 150 people in its ruins had it fell at the time of low water, and when those employed in saving the cargo were at work, as the cliff gave way exactly at the spot where all the spectators were assembled. The remains of the wreck were on Friday sold on the beach for £7, but before they could be broken up and removed, there was another fall of the cliff which nearly buried the whole lot.
What's up? What's the hurry?
Come on, it's tea time!
Oh! Oh yeah! Tea.
Chop, chop! Don't know about you, I can't find it.
Ah, it's around here somewhere.
It was foggy last time, wasn't it?
It was very foggy.
I'm going to sit down for a minute.
Are you sure it's up here?
Well, that's what the map says.
Site of the church at Exeat we're looking for.
Yeah. I don't know, I haven't seen anything like that at all.
I don't know where it is. Oh, hang on a minute.
Oh.
I don't know if you can read that, it's got more shadow on it. What does it say?
It says, here formerly stood the parish church of Exeat, built probably in the 14th century and abandoned in the 15th century, the parish being incorporated with Westdean in 1528. The foundations were uncovered under the supervision of the Reverend G.W.A. Lawrence, rector of Westdean of the Sussex Archaeological Society. A vessel came on shore near Birling Gap on Wednesday evening, but from the state of the stores when found, the hull having gone into sticks, it is impossible to ascertain from anything that has been found what she was and where she came from. Not a vestige of the cargo has appeared, consequently it may be presumed that she was in ballast. If she was, it was supposed, a foreign brig. Every soul on board must have perished.
coming?
No, I'm not.
Why not?
Because it's too cold.
Alright.
You going skinny dipping?
Yeah.
That'd get rid of all these people then, wouldn't it? Go on then. That's staying in.
Alright.
Take two. Go on then, where we been?
Over there.
Yeah?
Yep. Over the top of Seaford Head. Down to the Coast Guard cottages. Then we turned off following that bush line. All the way along, bush line, and then up. Just see the road in the background, and that's where the pub is. We had a cup of tea there. And then we gone up the road, up the hill, to the church stone, and then back down here to the beach. So we got the hard bit to do.
And what are all these?
Oh yeah, that's Operation Cuckmere, wasn't it? And that's tank traps where they thought the Germans would invade.
And we're going.
Ah, that's Cuckmere Brow, I think, if I remember rightly.
Okay.
And then over the Seven Sisters to Birling Gap.
Yeah. This is the hard bit. Still, we're all warmed up.
Yep.
Let's go.
Okay. Well, this is what we believe the boulder boats were coming ashore to load up with, and it's the blue flint, which they would then take away, heat up, crush, and then mix with the glass for the Staffordshire potteries for the blue glass. It's not going up full of a ledge, isn't it?
C'est devenu un chemin.
Except it's not a sheet of ice. I mean, you're going to ride down there?
No, I'll let you come and wait for them, it's alright.
Oh yeah, you're a braver man than me.
Good fun.
Rain fell almost continuously on Saturday, and towards evening the coast was obscured by a thick fog, which was the cause of the fishing ketch Peace running ashore at Birling Gap and becoming a total wreck. The vessel, 24 tons, which belonged to the port of Ramsgate, left Plymouth on Tuesday, March the 30th, and was homeward bound with fish caught in the channel. The crew consisted of Captain Wilcox, the mate Norris, Goldring third hand, and Pottle a boy. About 5:45 on Saturday evening the vessel ran ashore at Birling Gap. The sea was smooth at the time and the crew were able to get ashore in their rowing boat and take with them the greater part of their clothes. On landing they were provided with food and shelter by the militia guarding the coast. The ketch was washed up close to the cliffs and became a total wreck, notwithstanding the fact that she was built 13 years ago of solid oak. The captain and the mate walked to Eastbourne on Sunday morning, and a taxicab was sent to Birling Gap to fetch the third hand and the boy. The crew found their way to the Victoria Hotel in Latimer Road, and it was stated that they would be sent home in the afternoon by the Shipwreck Mariner Society, an organisation which is constantly providing its value in these dark and troublesome times. We're now coming up to a place called Crow Link, a famous smuggling spot. You used to be able to access the beach from here, but not anymore. And the following is taken from the Kentish Gazette of 1839. Crow Link Gap, a difficult path leading from the beach by steps cut or worn into the chalk towards a solitary farmhouse near Friston Church, a spot so celebrated for landing contraband cargoes that for years the spirit shops of London were accustomed to advertise their stock of Hollands as being genuine Crow Link. Nor did that title fall into disuse till, upon application made by Captain McCulloch, founder of the blockade service, a watchhouse was erected in the pass, and a party of preventative officers and men was permanently stationed there. As the sea at high water reached the base of the cliff, it was, of course, necessary to withdraw the sentinels from the beach at such periods in order to station them along the summit. But the gapways being so far apart, this change occupied a considerable time, particularly during winter, when the men became tired and drowsy from the fatigue and incessant walking and the wearisome length of the night watches. The smugglers, aware of this circumstances and being enabled by the withdrawals of the sentinels to land their goods without molestation in any of the little bays formed upon the beach by the projecting angles of the precipice, having previously, during daylight, fixed upon the exact spot for their enterprise, and notched or otherwise marked its corresponding point upon the edge of the cliff above, they seized the opportunity when the tide drove the watchmen away from the beach, and before they could reach the summit, rushed to the appointed place, fixed a light wooden derrick into the grass, securing it firmly by an iron crowbar thrust through a hole at the end. In the centre of this derrick was a hinge similar to that in the joint of a boot jack, and at the outer extremity a running sheave inserted in a notch, which projected over the cliff, plumbing the bay below. Through the notch traversed a rope, by which a basket was rapidly lowered to the Confederates on the beach, and at the bottom of the basket hung a small handbell, the ringing of which, though inaudible above, was sufficient to indicate the descent and position of the basket to those beneath. 10 or 12 tubs of spirits were instantly crammed into it, the rope jerked as a signal to pull up, and the other end of it being fastened to an active horse. The basket was drawn up at a gallop, and the hinge of the derrick allowing it to turn inward, threw the cargo out upon the grass without further difficulty, the whole process being accomplished in less than 10 minutes, which was repeated or not according to the smugglers' scouts, posted to the right or left, gave notice of anyone approaching, the height of the cliff making no difference than it might require a few fathoms of rope more or less to effect the object. The incident by which this method of smuggling was detected may appear exaggerated, but there are many officers living who can testify to its truth. One very dark night, when a cargo was to be derricked over the cliff near Birling Gap, by some mistake the smugglers landed their goods before the last sentinel had quitted the beach. The scouts, perceiving him strolling unconsciously towards the spot, gave silent and timely notice of his approach, and the whole party, retreating hastily into their boat, pushed off unseen. In the confusion, however, created by this interruption, they either forgot to give the usual signal for pulling up the goods, or it was unfelt by those on top of the cliff, so that, in passing along, the sentinel actually ran against the basket, and not knowing how it was suspended, or what were its contents, he began pulling on the rope. When he felt the basket beginning to ascend, and endeavouring to keep it down by main force, was suddenly swayed off his legs and carried up with such velocity that, not knowing how far he might have to fall, he had not courage to release his hold. Although the cliff at that part was 300 feet high, in a few minutes he was hoisted to the summit and bundled out headlong with the brandy kegs into the midst of smugglers. Not even the suddenness of his aerial flight nor the number of his opponents could deprive this gallant fellow of the presence of mind, but before this mistake was discovered he succeeded in firing his pistol as the alarm, whereupon the smugglers vanished like the witches in Macbeth, leaving 10 anchors of cognac and the whole derricking apparatus behind them. Soon after, when the writer had arrived at this spot and ascertained the accuracy of this extraordinary story, he questioned the captain as to his feelings during his ascent. "Why, sir," said Jack, "I held on like grim death, and we wasn't long travelling up to the top.